Remember when you were a kid, and the coolest thing you could get for Christmas was the latest Lego set? Remember how awesome it was to build that brand new Millennium Falcon, then take it apart and combine the pieces with some of your old sets to make something even better? Well, if anyone does, it's the game developer Rare, the makers of Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts for the Xbox 360. A build-your-own vehicle game that throws all the previous Banjo mechanics out the window in favor of a game that can be best described as a huge box of Legos on a disc. If you haven't kept up with the story of the previous Banjo games, then that's just fine. At the beginning of the game, there's a flashback explaining what has happened in the original two games. For those of you that do know the characters, the story basically goes that Grunty is back and she's up to no good. The difference this time is that your battles against each other are overseen by a giant floating game of Pong called the Lord of Games, or LOG for short. There really isn't much of a plot to speak of. There's your basic good guys and bad guys, that's about it. While the lack of a proper story may be disappointing for some, it doesn't really impact the gameplay at all. The worlds of Nuts and Bolts are designed in an arts and crafts sort of style. The excuse for this is that every world you play in is the design of LOG. This type of world fits because it provides a nice alternative to invisible walls, seeing as how even the open, outdoor environments have ceilings and boundaries. Or at least, most of them do. All of the textures and models are beautifully rendered. The animations are solid, but the gibberish that everybody speaks can get old after a while. Luckily, most of the dialogue is skippable. The physics engine works, but it can seem rather weird. At times, containers seem to have their own gravitational pull, as flying around with something in your cargo bay won't make it fall out, and at other times, you'll be constantly landing that plane to pick up what you just dropped, because it magically jumped out of your box for no reason. This does not happen often, but when it does, it gets very annoying and frustrating. The gameplay revolves around the vehicle creation. There are some missions where you have to use a pre-made vehicle, but these are few and far between. Your enjoyment of the game depends entirely on if you find the vehicle creation fun or not. If you're one of those people who used to love Legos and making things, then you'll fall in love with this game right away. But if you find yourself rushing through the creation in order to get to the missions, then prepare to be disappointed. The vehicle creation is very streamlined and easy to use. All the parts are nicely organized and you'll have no trouble finding any of the pieces you need. You can make a complex multi-function vehicle in around 10 minutes. It's extremely rewarding to try a mission, fail, then go into the creator and tweak your vehicle just a little, then try the challenge again and succeed perfectly. But like I said, if you don't like the creator, then you may as well skip this game, because most of the missions are generic, fetch something or race someone missions that would be really boring if you couldn't make your own cars. The only problem with the creation aspect is that there are many attachments that require a button push to work, and there are only 3 assignable buttons to use them. This means that if you're flying around in your fighter shooting things, then suddenly need to retract your wings and inflate your floaters to land in water, you have to spend 30 seconds fooling around with the reassignment buttons to do so. The multiplayer is very cool. Most of the time I spent in multiplayer was with a friend just fooling around on the test track. One of us made a vehicle to try to kill the other, and the other made a better vehicle, so we were constantly tweaking our vehicles to make it better than our friends. The actual multiplayer game modes consist of things like an egg race, where you have to be in a generic race, only you have to carry a breakable egg in your cargo bay, and an especially fun mode called Queen of the Knoll, which works like King of the Hill, only the hill is in constant motion, so you and your opponent not only have to fight over who's in the hill, but you have to keep up with the area as it has the tendency to bolt away at fast speeds when you're not expecting. This makes for an original and fun time. As I said before, the voice acting consists of gibberish that's different for each character. Some of it is cute and some of it is just painful to listen to, but after a while, all of it will get old to a point that you'll skip most of the dialogue. Story be damned. The rest of the sound is fantastic. It fits the cartoony direction of Nuts and Bolts. Springs, ejector seats, and the like all sound like they might in a Looney Tunes episode. The music is great, although it does tend to get stuck in your head for a while. The only other problem I can think of may seem like a minor one, but it can get really old. And that's the fact that every single mission is timed. I understand why the developers did this. It's to gauge how good you do and if you should get a trophy or a jiggy or what kind of rewards you should get, but it still gets really old. Depending on who you are, this latest Banjo is hit or miss. If you don't like making your own rides, failing with them, then tweaking them just so, then I recommend skipping nuts and bolts. However, if you're like me and are really into that stuff, then I would name this a must-buy. Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts gets a very high A. Next week on The Perspective, Home is out! My first impressions, plus I give you my review of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix. Does this fighting classic stand the test of time? All this and more in 7 days on the Sharp and Pointy Perspective.